So I think we're right about 5:40. So I think we're just gonna get started. Anyone that kind of joins in from now shouldn't have any issues. But just to kind of start from scratch, hello everyone. My name is Matthew Winter. I am one of the co-founders of the Talented 10th Collective. We also go by T10 for short, T10 Collective. Um, you're here today because we've partnered with the Harlem Chamber of Commerce to put together a webinar series. This series is really focused on being able to speak directly to members of the small business community, whether you're an entrepreneur, small business, medium-sized business, to really be able to figure out how do you navigate these very unprecedented times. If you go back 2 months ago, I doubt anyone would be able to say that they saw this coming and really be able to gauge the impact that it's going to have and that it is currently having on the small business community. Many of us are Harlemites, and so being able to just be local and see how it's affecting local business, it's really something to see. And so as a unit, we partnered with the Harlem Chamber of Commerce to really be able to figure out what are some ways that we can try to provide a resource in the best way that we can to really kind of be a ear to what's going on and provide as much of a resource as possible. And so today is the first of a three-part webinar series that's going to be focused specifically on different avenues that you can take to not only get your business back on track, regardless of what industry or vertical you're in, but how you can kind of take it from there, knowing that the business world of tomorrow is likely not going to be coming back. What are ways that we can adapt our businesses respectively to be able to adapt for that new world? And so we'll get right into it, but just to kind of start off, did want to kind of just go through some rules of kind of how the webinar is going to be going. As I mentioned, my name is Matthew Winter. I think we jumped a slide down, but it's okay. So like I mentioned, my name is Matthew Winter. Myself, along with two other gentlemen who you'll be hearing from, Donald Weber and Kevin Chambers, we are the Talented 10th Collective, or T10 for short. Quick little blurb about our business. At our core, we're a consultancy. We work with many small businesses in the Harlem and greater New York region, businesses of different varying sizes and industries, to really be able to dig deep and figure out how we can help you not only reach your target customer, ways that we can conduct workshops for whether it's local community members or the next generation, the youths. We've done a number of programs in those capacities where, we really tried to figure out how can we leverage the experience that we have from the corporate world and really be able to kind of build and expand on the local small business community, which kind of brings us to today. So Don, if you move to the next slide, this slide really kind of just represents the overarching goal of this series at large. As I mentioned in the beginning, this is a three-part series. And so this first one is really focused on kind of just breaking down and understanding what can you do today, knowing that, again, you definitely didn't see it coming, and more likely than not, your business has been impacted financially by COVID. So knowing that there's the CARES Act and a number of various financial resources that are out there at our disposal, what are some ways that you can not only understand and get a better understanding of what those resources are, but how can you make them work for you respectively? And so what you'll see in today's part is going to be specifically focused on that. But as you can see, part 2 and part 3 are really going to be focused on what can you do tomorrow and thinking ahead, knowing that it's paramount more than ever to really start thinking for the future as opposed to just thinking about today solely. Because, I don't know how many of you are paying attention to the news, but, with every changing news cycle, we find out that, the stay-at-home is being extended. And with that, there's severe implications to the business community, and specifically the small business community always ends up kind of feeling the brunt of it more than ever. But the entire focus of this webinar series is really about uniting. This is a partnership with the Harlem Chamber of Commerce. And so with that, many of the attendees we're assuming are going to be Harlemites. But that's actually why we're so excited about this partnership, because in addition to being small business owners ourselves, we're Harlemites, native New Yorkers. And so, we're experiencing a lot of the challenges that you're facing. And we're fortunate enough to be able to lean on a lot of the experiences that we have from corporate America to be able to navigate our businesses, our business. But we wanted to really be able to make sure that we can give back to the local community and be able to present you all who are joining us this evening with as many answers as possible. One thing that we did want to note is that we are going to be providing a general overview of the resources available, but what we are not is financial experts. That's not really our forte. We do have a lot of financial knowledge, but as it relates to the information that you're going to find today, what we've done is really consolidated into one presentation all of the resources available to you. Everyone's business is different. You have different customers. You're in different categories and verticals, and so what we wanted to make sure is that all of the information that you're going to hear today is an even slate that is going to be applicable to all businesses. But if you do have any specific questions, we would encourage you to utilize the resources that we are going to be providing in this presentation, ranging from the government's small business website, even your local bank, whoever you're banking with from a business standpoint, to be able to figure out how can you apply these financial principles to your specific business. A few more quick rules of the road. Everything that you are going to be seeing today is going to be sent to you. So for everyone who had to pre-register for this, part of that reason is because we want to be able to follow up with the materials in addition to a replay of this webinar. If you, for whatever reason, had to join late or you have to hop off early, this full presentation is going to be available to you. It will also be listed on our T10 Collective YouTube page, which we'll provide the links to as well. And our hope is that you're going to find this webinar useful. There's a lot of information, and really what we wanted to make sure is that we're breaking it down for you in layman's terms. We are going to be, in many senses, speaking to you in the beginning, but there will be a portion of this towards the end of the presentation where it will be more dialogue focused, and we do want to hear from you. And if you do feel that this was a beneficial webinar for you, we will be providing a short 3-question survey, and we would appreciate it if you would just give us your candid feedback, anything that you loved, you didn't like, and any suggestions that you have on how we can make it better moving forward. And so once we get into the presentation, we are going to mute all guests. And so if you do have any questions, again, there will be a question and answer portion within the last 15 minutes. But you can raise your hand. There's the raise hand button that you should see toward the right, as well as feel free, as we're talking, to add your questions to the chat box as well. And when we get to the question and answer portion, we'll make sure that we address those first. And with that, we can move on to the next slide. So again, we gave you the overview of what the series is going to look like on a whole. And again, this specific part of it is going to be focused on all of the financial information. Really, what can you do today from a financial standpoint? And so in 3 quick parts, we're going to break down for you today just an understanding of what the CARES Act even is. I know that's one of those things that everyone is kind of hearing, and it's becoming very ubiquitous. And I'm sure a lot of you may not necessarily know because there's so much information. And so that's what we're here for today, to really kind of break it down for you. As I mentioned, we are then going to go into our question and answer portion. We did compile a number of frequently asked questions just based off of just general questions that you likely will have, because many of them we had for ourselves. But then finally, there is going to be a checklist, which is almost kind of not necessarily homework, but almost like a next step that you can take for yourselves to be able to figure out what are the things that I can be doing for my business today, and what is something that I need to be doing next in order to act upon it. So that's kind of the rules of the road, as well as a breakdown of the presentation. And with that, I'm going to pass it along to my colleague, Kevin, who's going to take you through the first section. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Matthew. Before we jump in, I just want to give a brief overview of the CARES Act in general, as to what that is, so that everyone has at least a base ground to work with. So, back in March of 2020, the US lawmakers passed a $2 trillion stimulus bill called the CARES Act, which I'm sure we've all at least have heard of. The CARES Act stands for Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security. This act effectively was created to reduce the impact of the economic downturn, which was set in motion due to the coronavirus pandemic, which we are all currently living under, and hopefully everyone and their family will keep them in prayers and are safe. But this bill, from a United States standpoint, is the largest bill to have been passed in terms of a rescue package overall in U.S. history. And so on this slide that we see here, what we wanted to do is lay out a few of the major CARES Act programs. And so I'm just going to go from left to right. And so the first program that we see here is the Paycheck Protection. So if we flip to this next slide here, on this page, as previously discussed, the actual bill itself is over $2 trillion. And so what we've done on this slide is basically to show you a very high level view of how that was broken up. And so I'm just going to go through the various components just so that you have a general understanding. And so on the first line, over $500 billion went to service distressed industries. So I know, one of the major industries that has been in the news a lot has been the airlines industries. And so as part of the overall package, various companies were assisted by the United States government during this time. 377 billion went directly to small businesses, and we'll dive into that component on the next slide a little bit deeper. I'm going to continue to go from here. Over 300 billion went directly to individual families, through, I think it's 1,200 to 2,400, depending on an individual, to a family unit, or it can be a little bit lower depending on your income level from there. Beyond that, additional dollars went towards supplemental insurance, healthcare support, state and local government support, as well as 600 billion went to other types of support, whether it be on a local, state, or national level. You can turn to the next slide, please. So on this slide, I wanted to go a little bit deeper into the small business support. And so here, one slide up, Matthew. Perfect. And so here, that $377 billion that we mentioned on the prior page went into three major buckets. The Paycheck Protection Loans Program, which we discussed a few minutes ago. Also, $17 billion went towards the Small Business Association in terms of the debt forgiveness, and they'll cover debt and principal and interest over a 6-month time period, which we also discussed. Additionally, another $10 billion went directly for the Direct Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. And so, the United States effectively recognizes, as we all do, that this is a tough time for individuals and businesses. Currently they have $2 trillion worth of relief packages that they're currently funding out. What we wanted to do is just ensure that, at least from a base level, that that there is money out there if you have a small business and are looking for a loan or for some level of relief. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Donnie. We'll flip to the next slide as well, Matt. Thank you. Donald, you're on mute.
Yep, sorry about that. Thank you, Kevin. So now as we kind of transition, what I really want to do here is just take a quick break. So you see, there was a lot of activity that occurred in the course of the first Relief Act. That first funding, as we all well know, after about a week and a half, 2 weeks, was fully depleted. But from that, there's a lot of takeaways that we can have and we can apply it to the future. So what we tried to do here is kind of put our own outlook on things that have occurred. So I think the first major thing is basically just the overall pandemic's impact on the economy can be seen in a lot of different ways. And so we tried to highlight some of those key ones. And some of those included the pandemic's direct impact on financial stability. So we noticed that a lot of the primary forces in the impact of a small business came in the financial stability, whether that be for the business itself or the customer. And as a result, we did see a lot of change in customer confidence. So, our traditional spending in certain industries quickly decreased. So a lot of consumer confidence began to also disrupt and change things in the small business community. And I think lastly is the stoppages and effects to supply chain. So if you're a local restaurant, if you're a local manufacturer, if you develop customer goods, your manufacturing in a lot of cases has been heavily disrupted, causing you to have to rely very much so on local sourcing. So we wanted to highlight some of those key areas so that, as we do try to outlook for the future, we're thinking about these disruptions. And then also what we did notice a lot is for the lucky small businesses that were able to receive funding in that first round, the ones that did have success tended to be the small businesses that had strong relationships with their local banks. So we do want to emphasize, and we'll get into this in more detail, the importance of establishing those lines of communication with your local bank, with your credit unions, with your community banks, so that as these opportunities arise, you can swiftly react. But what we're going to do is we're going to try to do our part in sharing a lot of this information with you. So some key takeaways from that initial two were, one, roughly 4,400 of the loans that were approved exceeded $5 million, which is interesting number. And then in addition to that, the average loan that was provided in that initial round averaged around 200K nationally. Give you kind of some insight into what that looked like. So now I'm going to transition to the next slide. Okay. And so here, now we're at the second round of relief funds. And in this iteration, they've released a total of $484 billion. And that spans across various areas. Aid directly to small businesses, but also aid to hospitals and also the expansion of COVID-19 testing. So what we did here is we tried to, similarly in past slides, break that down to give you an understanding of where the money's going. So highlighted in yellow, you're going to see all of the allocations that are directly impact the small business community. So you have a replenishment of the paycheck protection loans, which total to about 310 billion. You then had direct funding that went specifically to small lenders and community banks. And I do want to pause here because this is important. After the initial round of funding, as it was probably well covered in the media, a lot of the money didn't get in the hands of the small business communities like ours. So what they tried to do in this iteration is specifically put money in the hands of the lenders that most likely work with small businesses. So your credit unions, your small lenders, and your community banks. So there is funding that's put into the hands of a lot of the banks that we work with. So it's important that we try to capitalize on that as much as possible. And then moving further down the list, you had 10 billion that went to the direct economic injury disaster loan program that Kevin covered earlier. And then lastly, you had funding going to healthcare, whether that's through healthcare support, the expansion of testing, and other. So transitioning to the next slide. So, there's a lot of information here, but what we really wanted to do is to try to take a lot of the information that you might be seeing out there and trying to put it into more of a simplistic, intuitive table so that as you guys look at these materials and refer to them after today, you can kind of quickly see what these programs are and what they offer. So what we've tried to do in this chart is list out and highlight two of the major programs, the one being the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, and then the other being the Paycheck Protection Loan Program. So both here, what we've done is we've tried to highlight a summary of each, specifically indicating, what they're offering. In the case of the EIDL, they're offering small, low interest loans that are capped at a certain percentage. And then in the Paycheck Protection Program, similarly for low interest loans at a different cap. And then we try to highlight as well periods in which they cover, how to define whether or not you're eligible. What if you have investors or affiliations? How does that impact your availability or your eligibility rather? And then lastly, how much of the loan can you receive? So I think this is really key information that we hope is beneficial for you guys, so that as you're referring to these materials after this call, this is something you could directly refer to help you navigate your path as far as trying to tap into these resources that are available. So, I'm going to take the second to move to the next slide. So now we've spoken about kind of the impacts that we saw initially out of the first round. Then we talked about the programs in general and the allocations of the most recent package. And in addition to that, a summary of the various few. Now what we want to do is really speak to you more tactfully about what specific information you need to put yourself in the best position to receive these funds. So if you can move to the next slide. So here what we've tried to do is create for you somewhat of a cheat sheet or a checklist that simply lays out some of the key documentation you're going to need to have at your fingertips when you begin to engage in conversations with your local lenders. So here we've discussed how do you apply? And the way you do that is you contact your third-party private lenders. So those are your community banks, those are your local banks, your credit unions. You're reaching out to them directly, and you're verifying whether or not they offer these loans. Now, I will give you one tip. If you refer to the Small Business Association website, they have a search filter where you can type in your zip code, and they list all of the banks within a certain radius that offer these loans. So you can quickly kind of drill down and identify what are the banks that you can begin having conversations with. Now, once you have those conversations, it's important to have a few items. One is at least 3 prior years worth of business tax returns if available. Also, you're going to want to have personal tax return information on your ownership. You're going to have federal tax filing from 2019. And if you don't have one available, and we all understand there's been extensions that have been offered due to the pandemic, you're going to want to have a reasoning as to why. In addition to that, you're going to have financial statements. You're going to want to have information about your average payroll. You're going to have debt information, corporate records, your business licenses, your loan records. And then lastly, if there's any business descriptions or history. So if you are equipped with this checklist of information, it will give you the best first step at the application process. So again, we hope that this is helpful for you all, that this is something you can refer to. And, if there are additional questions you may have or information that you still want to navigate, we're happy to try to assist as best as we can. So I think with that, we can transition to the next slide. Okay, so now we've reached a point where we've kind of covered a lot of information, right? We've spoken about the programs, the lessons learned from them, information on how to apply, information about the programs. And now what we want to do is touch on some frequently asked questions and kind of transition to the latter part of the presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to Matthew here.
All right, thanks a lot, Donnie. So hopefully over the past few slides and everything that Kevin and Donnie have mentioned, you should have a pretty strong understanding, at least preliminarily, of what the CARES Act is, what the PPP or the Paycheck Protection, PPL, which is Paycheck Protection Loan, say that 3 times fast, are. As I mentioned in the beginning, we did compile a number of kind of frequently asked questions. And so as you'll see, we did not only provide what the questions are, but in the interest of time, we also provided, pre-populated the answers as well. Knowing that we are running a little low on time, I won't go through each of them individually. I'll just kind of top line the first few. And as I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, we will be sending this presentation to you all as a follow-up. So no worries if we're not able to get to any of these specifically, as you'll be able to access these links afterwards. So the first one is, what am I eligible for under the CARES Act? So as Donald mentioned, there are a number of relief programs that are within the CARES Act. The CARES Act overall kind of just serves as a container for the funding. But within that, there is also the Paycheck Protection Program, which you are able to apply to through your bank. In terms of what the qualifications are and how much you can borrow, we've provided here a link that takes you directly to all of the qualifications. I would say the most important thing, as we've kind of stressed throughout the presentation, is really the timeliness of it. we can't stress enough how important it is for you to really take advantage as soon as possible. Tomorrow's Friday. If you're able to get to the bank tomorrow, please do so, because as we saw with the first round, the funds do expire pretty quickly. And so we want to make sure that everyone is able to get access to the funds, because we're not sure when the next round will actually be rolling out, if there is another round. And I will move forward through these, but as you'll see, we have broken down these frequently asked questions into sections. So first, it speaks about the CARES Act overall, and then this next section speaks specifically to programs that are available for small business owners within New York City. And then the next section talks specifically about other loans and financial resources that are available that may not necessarily be represented within the CARES Act, with things that are available locally as well. And so, I'm sorry. This is the point in the presentation, though, where we did want to open up the floor for any questions that anyone may have. So what we will do is, if you have a question, you can raise your hand or feel free to unmute yourself. Don't be shy. There's no such thing as a bad question here. Again, the whole point of this is really for everyone to be able to kind of ask any questions that they may have. Okay. So what I will actually, there is, check it. So I think I need to, sorry, in order to get to the questions, I will need to move to the next screen. 1 second. Okay, so the question from Grace, thank you for your question, Grace, is when does the PPP become a loan? So Donnie and Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, but the PPP inherently is a loan. I think what makes it unique is the forgiveness, the terms of forgiveness. We know historically the government usually isn't as forgiving in terms of the length of time as well as the interest rates. And so I think within the PPP, there's a certain amount of time that it does operate as a loan, but the amount of interest is actually very low, and something that may not necessarily last for much longer.
Yeah, and then to just piggyback off of what Matthew shared, I think he was exactly right. In addition to that, there is that forgiveness element. And then we do urge you as well for additional information to refer to some of the frequently asked questions, but also the SBA website. They have a really good, they've done a really good job of like summarizing everything. So we'd encourage you to refer to their website as well, and your local banks, because they'll give you kind of all of the details and specifics in terms of terms, offers, and everything like that you'll be eligible for. So yes, so Grace, I think you followed up as well with that. So yes, so it is in the form of a loan, and there have been questions that have been raised about the complexity between receiving that loan and employment insurance and things of that nature. For that, we would encourage you to contact the Small Business Association, because I think there has been some, as they've been allocating these fundings, there has been some complexity with that. But we would urge you to talk to your banking professional about that, and they can kind of walk you through kind of the best path forward for your unique situation.
Thank you for the question, Grace. That was very good.
We appreciate the question. Thank you.
Any other questions? Feel free to put them in the chat, or just feel free to unmute yourself.
Yes. What are the stipulations for forgiveness for the PPP?
I believe they do vary depending upon your business size and the unique circumstances of your financial stability as an organization. We do have a few, I think we have some information there in a prior slide that speaks somewhat to it, but I would also encourage you to walk through those in detail. I think as they're rolling this out and going through further iterations, the standards as which they're applying are potentially evolving. So to get the latest and greatest, I would refer to the small business website. And additionally, we can also try to connect offline as well in the event that you're looking for any additional insight. We can do a little bit of digging ourselves. I would encourage you to check out the website because there has been some evolving elements to it from the lessons learned of the first rollout to the most.
That's right.
Relief.
And I think just to add a little bit to that, and so with the PPP, again, I agree with Donald 100% that you should definitely speak with your local bank. But generally, 75% of the PPP loan must be used to fund payroll and employees, and then the remaining 25% for interest, lease payments and utilities. So effectively, if you stick to that guideline, from what we have seen, you have the ability to have that debt forgiven. But again, I think it is very specific to your business, but they do have a sort of a strict guideline as to how your loan can be forgiven, which effectively turns it into a tax-free grant.
Any other questions? Okay, taking a look at the clock, we have about 5 minutes left. So, I'm sorry, Allison did have a question. A second. Okay, so Allison's question is in regards to the small business loan. When the government mentioned about this loan, was it true that big corporation companies took hold of it first? So Allison, unfortunately, you are right. So as we've seen, historically, when any type of government aid does become available, unfortunately, the large organizations, via, whether it's friends or just kind of through taking it backdoor, have been getting the funds a lot faster than small businesses. And we know more than anyone that the small business community actually needs it a lot more than these large corporations who are essentially looking for bailouts. And so that was the main issue as to why the fund kind of ran out the first time so quickly. But from what we're seeing, actually, just in terms of timeline, this round has lasted a little bit longer. And we're hoping that it doesn't become depleted as quickly. But the hope is that more small businesses have been able to take advantage of it, and it's not just the large corporations who have been able to take advantage first.
I would like to add to that, Matthew, to that as well as, I think that's kind of what brought us here today. We wanted to ensure that we're passing this information along and bringing awareness to it as much as possible so that our community could hopefully tap into these resources. Now, if I were to shed one positive light, I would say that in the most recent relief package, they did have a specific section carved out to small lenders with the intention for it to hopefully go in the hands of small businesses at a higher rate. So, I think that gives a small window of hope for us to hopefully be able to tap into those resources. But unfortunately, companies with broader, infrastructure and the ability to swiftly respond to these things were the ones that got to it first. But we're hoping that these conversations can grow and that we can, build more awareness so that people within our own community are able to tap into these resources.
Any other questions? Okay, great. So to kind of wrap things up, thank you again. We really, really appreciate you joining us for today's webinar. Again, there's a ton of information out there, but hopefully that you feel that this webinar, you took the 40 minutes to really be able to dig deep with us, and you're walking away from this with a lot more of an understanding than when you came in. So just kind of looking ahead as to kind of what is a little bit further down the timeline for us. As we mentioned, the next step really is focusing on knowing the fact that we're moving into a much more digital world. What are ways that we can be taking advantage of the tools that are available to us? I'm sure many of us may have been familiar with the Facebooks and the Instagrams and the Googles of the world prior to this. But I think we're seeing pretty rapidly that it's paramount that we have not only a foundational understanding of it, but we're really truly leveraging each of those digital tools to really be able to move our businesses forward. And not only is it because that's where our customers are, but that's the future of business. Physical touch points look like they're moving rapidly away, and they're becoming a thing of the past. And so as small business owners, it's really important for us to be able to make sure that not only do we have a strong digital presence, but we're able to really navigate and service our customers digitally at all touch points. And so within the next session, we're really going to be focusing specifically on that. How do you move from a business that was predicated primarily on foot traffic to something virtual? How can you use social media and various tactics to be able to really drive success for your business? That one's going to be a fun one. We may even roll out a case study or two, but we really hope that you found this informational and that you'll join us for the second one, as well as bring a friend, bring a friend or a colleague for the second one and help us spread the word. Because again, as we mentioned in the beginning, this is really about us uniting together and really kind of sharing our knowledge together. So in addition to that, for part 2, looking ahead to part 3, that's when we're really focusing on how can we then, with the things that we've learned in part 1 and part 2, optimize our respective businesses for success. We're going to go really deep into Google Analytics, which is an amazing free tool out there that a lot of businesses aren't tapping into. But it is something that is going to be even more important moving forward because not only will it provide you with a lot of information, it provides you with a lot of actionable information, which is the most important information that we have moving forward. We'll also talk about some key trends that we've been seeing. It has been roughly 2 months since we've been under coronavirus, but there's been a lot of interesting trends that we've seen in all industries, not just the brick and mortar businesses as well. So for everyone who has joined us today, we will be sending communication around how you can join us for part 2 and part 3. And we hope that you'll not only join us, but spread the word and invite your friends and colleagues as well. And then finally, we did want to just give a big shout out to our partners for this. I would imagine many of you did come through the Chamber of Commerce. And not only are they an amazing organization that's doing great work locally, but they are also, in addition to supporting local businesses, they're helping families and the homeless as well. So what they are doing, they are working with a number of great organizations such as, Rethink Food, local churches, to really be able to not only provide food and resources, but being able to really be able to meet the needs of the local community in whatever way is possible. And so you can help support via their GoFundMe page. We will provide that information as well in our follow-up, but be sure to speak to your respective rep from the Chamber of Commerce, whether that's Lloyd, Clayton, or Patricia, and they can provide you with more information about how you can how you can support if you should feel compelled to do so. And then just finally, we just want to again say thank you. Here's our contact information. Again, we are T10 Collective. So my name is Matthew. You have Donald and Kevin. If you need to reach us with any questions, you can follow us on Instagram, or you can shoot us an email directly at info@t10collective.com. And here's also the email address for the Chamber of Commerce as well. We hope that you guys enjoy the rest of your evening, and we hope that you'll join us again for the next one. Thank you.